May God have mercy upon your souls.
Something's wrong. Something's amiss.
And a time of evil.
You shall die!
When the world needed a hero.
This one was all.
I'm about to die!
What it got was him.
Groovy. You know your shoelace is untied.
He's a 20th century guy.
For that arrogance, I shall see you dead.
Trapped in the Middle Ages.
All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up. This is my boomstick!
Now, let's talk about how I get back home.
Foretold by a mystical book.
Within its pages are passages that can send you back to your time.
Forewarned by a wise man.
You must recite the words Klaatu, Berata, Niktu.
I got it!
Fulfilled by a wise guy.
Klaatu, Barada.
When Naomi spoke the words, the army of the dead awoke.
Now he's got a date.
Give me some sugar, baby.
With the army of darkness.
You found me beautiful once.
Honey, you got real ugly.
Sound the trumpets. Raise the drawbridge. Drop the Oldsmobile. From Sam Raimi.
Oh, that's gonna hurt!
Director of Darkman. Comes Army of Darkness.
Well, all right, you ignorant pigs, put down your crack pipes and your beer bongs. It's time for Angry Tabletop Nerds Night at the Movies. This night's offering from Beyond the Pit is Army of Darkness, 1993, starring the great Bruce Campbell, Marcus Gilbert, and Embeth Davidtz as Sheila. This movie was actually finished in 1992, but did not come out until 1993. Basically, the tagline for this movie is trapped in time, surrounded by evil, low on gas. At the end of Evil Dead 2, Ash is sucked into a vortex that basically drops him smack dab into the Middle Ages of King Arthur's court. Army of Darkness is loosely based on a Mark Twain novel called Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court, and that was written in 1889. Connecticut Yankee also had a famous musical in 1949 starring the great Bing Crosby, and it's basically about a man who's knocked unconscious and wakes up in the Middle Ages. This has had many renditions throughout the years. This is what Hollywood likes to call a fish out of water story. Same vehicle for Big Trouble in Little China, a fish out of water. Jack Burton is not Chinese and does not live in Little China. So you have Ash, a smart employee, who basically gets sucked into a vortex. He's dropped into the Middle Ages. The plot is very similar. The other renditions of this, you had a 1931 version of this movie, Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. You had a remake in 1995, A Kid in King Arthur's Court, starring a very young Kate Winslet. Not to mention, you get in 2001, Black Knight, starring Martin Lawrence. Let's send a brother to the Middle Ages. Which I think they just would have killed Martin Lawrence unless he was doing his stand-up bit, which is actually pretty good. The thing I like best about Army of Darkness out of all the renditions of Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court is that he takes the time to weave his own tapestry. And his vehicle for this is sword and sorcery, which is basically my favorite genre. For the reason of Conan the Destroyer, which is probably the best cable movie ever made. It was PG-13. They never edited that movie for viewership on cable. They always showed the film in its entirety. This is another one, the original edit, that they could show in its entirety for the most part. There is the bootleg edition. We're not going to get too far into that one for the purposes of this review. The reason why it's not called Evil Dead 3 is because the studio at the time didn't want to give the license to that title out to Sam Raimi, and they felt that this movie could stand on its own away from the other two, even though this movie does complete the Evil Dead trilogy. You have the first one where you establish Ash as a character, and that movie's still very scary to this day, in my opinion, especially if you've never seen, like, if that's your first horror film, let that one be your first horror film, Evil Dead, and then you have Evil Dead 2, which it's still kind of scary, but you got that slapstick element to it where it's horror comedy. As a genre, like Tremors is horror comedy. You have funny elements happening in Tremors, which just don't normally happen in a standard horror movie. Okay, and so, how do you break down the plot? It's got 3 arcs, and the first arc is Ash wakes up in the Middle Ages, and the first thing he wants to do is go home. This movie is not that complicated. He's fed to a pit of monsters after being enslaved. He fights his way out of the pit of monsters. Then he asks, "How can I get home?" And they said, "Only the book can send you back." And that's like the number one plot device is the book. Everything resolves around the Necronomicon. Only the Necronomicon has the power to send you back. Ash leaves on a quest for the book. You meet your main cast of characters, and that's literally the first 26 minutes of this film. Part 2 of this film, Ash gets chased by a demon. He gets locked in a windmill trying to get away from the demon through the forest, that same demon that chased him in the second Evil Dead film, and he just kept running through the house like, oh my God, and he keeps finding places to back up into away from the demon, so they do a rehash of that scene, except out in the forest. And then later that night, while he's sitting there, he sees a doppelganger in the mirror, runs towards the mirror, breaks the mirror, which begets many shards of glass, thus spawning multiple tiny Ash doppelgangers. The doppelgangers are able to subdue Ash, and then they force him to swallow one of the doppelgangers. And this is where you get some more of those slapstick elements where he basically bumps his head, burns his hand, burns his face, and he swallows a pot of hot water trying to burn the guy, and then you have this sequence where he runs out of the cabin screaming he's got 2 heads. This whole movie it goes from a very serious beginning, a very serious intro, so you think you're going to have to a more comedic middle of this sandwich, as I would say. And then during a round of goody little two shoes, I'm good Ash, you're bad Ash, Ash basically pulls his shotgun out, shoots him, says good, bad, I'm still the man with the gun. Then in the bootleg version of that, he actually just says, I ain't that good, after he blows Evil Ash away. Evil Ash is then disemboweled and thrown in a trench, and then Ash shows up to the cemetery where the Necronomicon is supposed to be. Now, first best plot device is nobody ever mentioned 3 books. And he's like, what the hell do I do? Which one do I grab? So he immediately grabs a book, gets almost sucked into a vortex, and you almost lose Ash again. They could have spawned a show off of that. What if they had just ended the movie right there? Because that was a good little pull away where he gets sucked into the book, dead quiet for I want to say about 5 to 10 seconds, and then he pulls himself back out of the vortex, and his face is all messed up. Again, more comedy elements in there that Sam Raimi is very well known for in a lot of his films. Because, I still feel like he's one of those directors that wants to have fun. Because movies are supposed to be about fun and popcorn and going somewhere and getting away from the rigors of normal day life. It's supposed to be escapism, and this movie is very good escapism. Number 2, he grabs the next book. That book flies around like a bat, bites him, bites his hand, attacks his face, claws him up real good, and then goes back. Now, before he had left, he's supposed to say these words, Klaatu, Barada, Nikto. So now when he gets to the 3rd book, he's like, oh, I forgot the words. And that's a good element that they don't do in in Hollywood anymore. Now they just go out of their way to make every man look like a buffoonish oaf and then a woman has to sweep in and save us. Why can't the hero of our story just kind of be an idiot? Which kind of what Ash is. He's an S-smart employee, so that doesn't denounce too much intelligence there. So Klaatu Barada Nikto comes from the 1951 film The Day the Earth Still Stood. And again, on some of these other horror movie reviews, I think it was The Fly, which is no longer up, but I should re-review The Fly if you were a fan of my last channel that never got off the ground for talking movies because, I'm not the critical drinker. I wish I had some of that job, but I'm not. 1950s science fiction and 80s gore they're basically cousins. They're first cousins. You can't have one without the other. You can't come to Aliens without first having the movie Them. Them is the imprint for the movie Aliens, essentially. And that's very obvious. Watch both movies back to back and see how they stack up. You have a hive scene. You have an escape. You have a basic infection of the town and everything. You have a rescue at the end. Them is literally the imprint from where you get Alien. And so finally he grabs the first book. He goes, Klaatu Barada, and he mispronounces the words. And this summons an army of the dead that basically comes up out of the graveyard with the sole purpose of reclaiming the book. This also resurrects Evil Ash immediately. He's like, I live again, right there. So, that being said, he comes back to the town, and they knew that something wasn't wrong, and the wise man asked him, Did thou speaketh the words before you took the Necronomicon? Yes, I spoketh the words. And he's like, did you say well, maybe not every syllable. And then the village is big mad about that. They're kind of pissed off at him. But they were going to honor the deal. You get the book, and you send me back. Under no circumstances in the contract was Ash obligated to this situation. Then all of a sudden the demon sweeps down, grabs Sheila, and you go into the third arc immediately, which means the army of the dead is gathering out in the forest, according to the scouts. We'll get Henry the Red and his men to help us, and you have the preparing for battle scene. During the preparing for battle scene, this is probably one of the manliest things that you could ever watch with like your younger sibling in the 90s. And me and my brother used to call this movie The Ultimate. We knew it was Army of Darkness, but our nickname for the movie was The Ultimate Movie. Okay, so Ash gets his car. They drive it into town. He goes into the blacksmith shop with it, but they don't show you what he does to the car. He gets out a book from his trunk, and it's Chemistry 101, and they make gunpowder. Then he teaches them some kung fu, and they have this big preparing for battle scenes. The Army of Dead comes out of the smoke. I really like the smoke work where they come out and they've got musicians hitting skulls. It's very Warhammer-esque as they come out in full battle array and everything. It looks like Vampire Counts, feels like Vampire Counts. I wonder where they got the idea for the 1996 Vampire Counts Codex for some of those musicians and things of that nature. You actually have one with a drum kit. And I'll have to probably take a picture of that and put it up. But another thing that happens is they also smoked the background. And I like that. Horror movies these days and movies in general, they don't use a smoke machine anymore. And you should never get away from they should never have gotten away from being a smoke machine. Smoke adds a little bit of atmosphere. One of my favorite scenes in Near Dark is when Lloyd Coleman is just sitting in the police station talking to the sheriff. He's offered a cup of coffee, but the background, they used a smoke machine, and it gives it more of a sweaty, more gritty atmosphere, or smoke can add the effect of mist or fog, which makes things a little bit more suffocating as the undead host comes on. So they lay siege to the castle. You have flaming arrows that have dynamite on them. They have catapults that are also shooting dynamite, and you're basically exploding puppets. I like how they interspersed in between the ranks. You have they're shoulder to shoulder, and every other dude that isn't a dude inside of a suit is basically a skeleton on a broomstick, which is great, by the way. One of the things that this movie does very well during the battle scene is in some elements, they did the same animatronic rotoscoping that Ray Harryhausen did for Jason and the Argonauts. So that part where the undead skeletons are carrying the bridge to lay across the moat, basically, you film 4 guys and then you animate 4 skeletons frame by frame over the 4 guys to get that shot. And then they bring in the battering ram for a shot with so that's still a thing, and he paid good homage to Jason and the Argonauts because it's just one of those things that you if you have the budget for it, you might as well do it. They used it a little bit, but they didn't have a lot of budget for it. When Ash loses his skin and gets burned to death, the evil Ash, they use some of that rotoscope technology for the final bad guy in this movie. And so as they lay siege to this castle, you have 2 endings after this siege ends up, and you have the showdown between good and evil Ash. I know you've already seen the movie, so there's no reason to not spoil it. Where he shoots him out of that catapult and blows him up. He's given a potion, and in the bootleg edition, he drinks the potion. 1 more drop than he's supposed to. Wakes up in the future where he slept too long, where everything is basically destroyed. And that's the setup for the 4th movie. Was Ash never going to get back to his time? And the ending they gave you in the theatrical release that they used for USA and they use for television all the time is him telling the story to other people about how he could have stayed and been king to the other employees at S-Mart. He's then attacked by a demon, and he says, "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store." He has this fight with the demon and kills the demon. And then he says, "Yeah, I could have stayed. I could have been king. But in my own way, I kind of am king." And he grabs this woman that he was talking to, kind of thought he was cute. And he's like, "Hail to the king, baby." And that's how our movie ends. So personally, I wish there had been a 4th movie where he wakes up in the future and he ended up sleeping too long. I think that would have been something different. And different is always good, and when you give Sam Raimi different, he usually excels at that. I mean, Spider-Man 2 still, I'd have to say it's either the number 1 or number 2 best comic book movie ever made. Punisher comes close, but I think Spider-Man 2 has the mastery over that. That Dr. Octopus, Aunt May fight scene, the antithesis of everything that a comic book Spider-Man is supposed to be. So let's get to some of those Slayer Pit totals. We have 75 kills, 2 breaths, depending on the version you watch. 1 kill resulting in a geyser of blood, crossbow bolt to the back, 1 chainsaw decapitation, demon killed by wall of spikes, 1 pit full of monsters, 1 fork through the chest of a tiny person, scores of exploding skeletons, castle siege, swashbuckling, skeletons that talk, and skeletons on fire, kung fu, stick fighting, car-mounted fan of death, shotgun fu, chainsaw fu, backbreakers, rock chucking, shooting the main bad guy out of a catapult and exploding him. Slayer Pit awards to Sam Raimi as Best Director. Can anyone else out there think of a film that is more fun than Army of Darkness? A couple of movies come to mind. There's Goonies and Big Trouble in Little China. I personally sit more in the Big Trouble in Little China camp. You can sue me all you want for that one, but Jack Burton moves for nobody. End of story. Slayer Pit Awards for Best Actor, Bruce Campbell, with lines like "Hail to the King, baby," and "Listen up, you primitive screwheads, this is my boomstick." It's a 12-gauge double-barreled Remington. Every kid in the 90s who's a dude and has seen this movie knows those lines by heart. It's literally, I will give Army of Darkness this. It has more one-liners than Big Trouble in Little China any day of the week. And Bruce Campbell wrote a book called If Chins Can Kill, where he talks about this movie a lot. One thing that kind of pisses me off is that Sam Raimi never got back to the project fast enough. He should have given us a movie to follow up Army of Darkness or TV show immediately, but what happened to Bruce Campbell after Army of Darkness was he had landed a part on a TV show called Briscoe County Jr., and the show was a huge hit. It was a huge hit. It was fun. It was a different spin on a Western. It was basically the Wild Wild West movie before that stupid movie with Will Smith. Bruce was basically on a quest as Briscoe County to discover the coming thing. And in every couple of episodes or so, there would be a new invention, like the motorcycle, because they were coming in, I think they were at the beginning, they were basically at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution before World War I, yet still stuck in that steampunk phase in from the late 1870s to the early 1890s. And that's where Briscoe County was taking place. And one of the things they found, one coming thing was the motorcycle, the early concepts of the machine gun. Some of those coming things would come out in Briscoe County Jr. This show did not get picked up for a second season, and it kind of wrecked Bruce Campbell's career for a little bit because by then Sam Raimi was doing Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, and that was actually the huge hit. And Bruce Campbell would appear on those shows, Hercules and Xena, as Autolycus the Thief. Not to mention, he would direct several episodes of Xena Warrior Princess. He's always been a longtime friend, growing up with Sam Raimi. He says, I just didn't want to be the guy in all of Sam Raimi's films. Bruce Campbell made a brief appearance at the end of a couple of Sam Raimi films. There was Darkman in 1990, and then there was Intruder in 1989. I think S-Mart might actually have been that set from Intruder that they used, that store that they could film in night at, because you got to remember that Sam Raimi comes out of that indie film circuit, and so that set looks very similar to Intruder, So they might have still had that store, and that store might have still existed in the late, because you go from 89 to 90 to 93. That's only in a few years where they could have filmed that. So there's some fun facts. The Necronomicon also makes its appearance in Friday the 13th, Part 9, Jason Goes to Hell. They say it's what might have given Jason Voorhees his power. And another one is Ash's car, the Delta 88. That is an actual car owned by Sam Raimi that has been in several cars, not to mention Drag Me to Hell. I have to give Army of Darkness a 3-skull rating. Check it out. You will not be disappointed. And the reason for the 3-skull rating is there's a few hits against this movie where it starts out super serial. Very, very strong. I say 5 out of 5 setup. And then it gets weaker in the second act. And then it gets even weaker in the third act. There's some edits during the battle that don't make any sense, where it shows him yelling on the ramparts, "Hey, baby," after they blow up all the skeletons. There must have been something that happened that caused that huge edit. There's a more protracted siege to a certain extent, different camera angles during the run of the bootleg edition, which I still have to dig up. I could only find my original theatrical edition release. I have to dig up the bootleg edition. I thought I had it around here. I did not. So there's a few hits against it during the siege scene where it just doesn't take itself as serious as the beginning. Where I think if they had tried to keep it serious and they had a little less humor, and not so many of those humorous elements, and they kept it as serious as the pit was. You know, he gets the chainsaw, and then he lops off the hand and then the head of that demon, and then escapes the pit. I mean, everything in that first act is perfect. But I have to hit it for how weak the film goes past the siege. The fight between good and evil Ash, it's hilarious. It's slapstick to the max. And, I really give it to Bruce Campbell because he also played the part of evil Ash. A lot of people like to think that was Bill Moseley. That was not Bill Moseley, who is in the film, but he plays the Deadite captain who carries the banner into battle and has a couple of lines. So, that's it for Army of Darkness. Again, this came out to me through a Patreon request. If you have a movie you want me to review, you can get in touch with me on Instagram, and I will fetch you a prize for those movie reviews. If you're a patron and you've been there for a while, you can always hit me up to do a movie review like Army of Darkness. But if I have to go somewhere, there is another cost incurred with that. But anyway, what did you think of Army of Darkness? Is it the action movie Bible of the 90s, or do we give that to Conan the Destroyer? I don't know. It has some pretty good sword and sorcery elements, and that's my favorite genre of film, but I want to hear what you think. We'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to check out Army of Darkness and stay metal, my friends, and we'll see you soon.
I figured sold out. It's better to burn out than to fade away.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.